Welcome viewers, you're now watching Hornbill TV's newsroom with me, your anchor, Kekrazanyo Solo. Troubles brew within Nagaland's ruling coalition as elected members of the Dimapur Municipal Council from the Bharatiya Janata Party voiced their discontent. Alleging sidelining by their coalition partners, the BJP councillors claimed they were denied the opportunity to propose candidates for key positions despite the coalition agreement. The rift highlights growing tensions within the People's Democratic Alliance (PDA), threatening stability in local governance. As we all know, there has been rumours which now seems more likely to be factual information on the disparities between the BJP and the NDPP alliance. But to take a closer look at the unfolding developments, we will now be joined by our associate editor L. Nguli to have a brief discussion on this matter. Hello, L.
Yeah, hello.
Elle, thank you for joining us today to discuss on this much hot topic, I would say. But before we jump into this issue, let me first scratch the surface by pointing out which most likely is the core reason of the rift. First of all, a question that delves into the specific reasons behind the Congress' success despite its historical decline and lack of infrastructure in Nagaland. What were the key factors that contributed to the Congress' unexpected victory in Nagaland's Lok Sabha seat despite its organizational weaknesses in the state? Like, how did the narrative around Hindu nationalism and religious identity influence the outcome of the Lok Sabha election in Nagaland?
That's a very good question, Yuyo. The only thing here is, I think when we talk about democratic elections, when we talk about the democratic institutions and how they set up leaderships for the community, the idea is not necessarily to set up leadership that would represent the people. What we are talking about here is setting up leadership that will represent the ideology of the ideological premise that the ruling party or the ruling coalition wants to set up. It's not necessarily about people all the time, Yo-Yo. As much as we would like to think that the narrative of, let's say, the Congress party, or as much as we would like to believe that the narrative and the agenda of the BJP party is somehow it somehow works with the aspirations of the people in general, but it is not always like that. There are a lot of complexities involved in setting up leadership. The case that we saw for Nagaland in 2024, especially the election of Mr. Subungmirin Jamir, who is now Nagaland's Lok Sabha member, nobody saw that coming. And I think the least of it all, the NDPP and the BJP government in Nagaland did not see it coming, for the very fact that traditionally, when we talk of the parliamentary elections, traditionally across the country, it has always been the candidate of the ruling dispensation that have always won. And I think that optimism was reflected in the campaigning process. Now we're getting into the question. In the campaigning process, there was a lot of optimism. Oh, the NDPP and the BJP's candidate would win. But then, when the results were announced, we saw it otherwise. Now, what could be the reason that could have led this? I think we have had this discussion with Agivito earlier. Of course, questions of development is there. Questions of, an entire NDPP BJP wave was, people were saying that they're tired of this government after 15 years, or maybe at least give someone a chance. But I think when we look at the narrative, it's not so much about governance. It is not so much about even development, because look, we could have 3-4 Lok Sabha members representing the state, but when we look at the whole framework of development for a state, it is not the parliamentary members that's responsible for the development of any state. It is the government in ties with the center that actually decides the developmental progress of a state. So we cannot always take into account the idea of development, why the Congress won. And second, of course, there were, I think the Assam Chief Minister, Mr. Sama, had pointed out that, had alleged that there were some Christian elements who work against the PDA consensus candidate. But I don't think that also works, because if we look at the nature of the central government, I think there are a lot of different communities with the BJP party also. So particular to a small state like Nagaland, I don't think the whole idea of playing the religious agenda also work. So what I can say for now is that I think there was a certain level of complacence on the part of the ruling dispensation, that it could not really put forward its candidate in the Lok Sabha.
Yes, as you've mentioned that normally, or say in your words, traditionally it's the ruling party's candidate that usually turns out victorious for the Lok Sabha elections.
Right,
now this turns out to be an important question, because it all started after the Lok Sabha elections. What about regional conflicts and legislative actions in neighbouring states that affected the electoral choices of voters in Nagaland, particularly regarding the perception of BJP-led government stance on Christian issues, as you've mentioned just now? Now it comes down to how and why did the Congress, which seemed to have a huge wave during the Lok Sabha election, suddenly struggled in the subsequent civic polls, or say the ULB polls immediately after its Lok Sabha victory? Because there was a huge anti-BJP sentiments among the voters, but as we can see during the ULB elections, it was rather contrary, and BJP candidates also turned out victorious.
Yeah, I think if we take the context of the municipal elections and compare it to the results and the fortunes of the BJP and the NDPP, and compare it to what they experienced during the Lok Sabha elections, I think the narrative might be a bit similar, why people might have voted for the alliance parties, or why they might have voted for the independents and the other smaller regional parties. But I think what happened prior to the Lok Sabha elections and what happened in the municipal elections, the narrative and the reasons why people might have voted there might be a little bit of a similarity here, or at least an appreciation of the reasons that were used in the Lok Sabha elections. I think out of about 275 seats across the municipal institutions across Nagaland, let's say it was not surprising that the NDPP won by a very large number. 170, was it 175 or 172, 175 seats, right? The NDPP won 175 seats and the BJP got 25 seats. Now, it was not surprising that the NDPP got such a large number of seats, but it was very surprising that its partner, the BJP, won only 25. So what does it say? Or people might say, okay, this is the same results that we saw way back during the Lok Sabha elections, and now the people are still iterating the reasons why they voted for the NDPP or the BJP. We might say that. But again, regional politics is even more complex than national politics here, because leaderships are not decided by your ideologies in that sense. Here, leadership at the grassroots grassroots level is decided by personalities, by the capability of the individuals.
Yes, having said that, focusing on the political landscape in Nagaland following recent elections, touching on electoral strategies, ideological influence, regional conflicts and alliance dynamics, the internal dynamics within the ruling alliance in Nagaland post-elections and their potential impacts on governance and political stability in the state. What implications does the ongoing rift between, now this is the main question of this topic actually, what implications does the ongoing rift between NDPP and BJP in Nagaland have for their alliance and governance in the state?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question. Could you repeat that?
Yes. So I was asking that, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Yes, so the internal dynamics within the ruling alliance in Nagaland post-elections, as in post-Lok Sabha elections and the ULB elections, and their potential impacts on governance and political stability in the state. What implications does the ongoing rift between NDPP and BJP in Nagaland have for their alliance and governance in the state?
Yeah, it was not surprising that once the Lok Sabha elections were declared, and there were a lot of people, of course not at a party level and not at the organization level, that they started blaming each other. And there were quite a lot of party leadership from both from both the sides who were blaming each other in regard to why they lost the elections, the Lok Sabha elections. And right now what we're seeing is the controversy is still going on, the blame game is still going on. And the implication is that I think now we have got a new government at the center that is right at the cusp of new developmental visions, especially for the Northeast, and in regard to the Act East policy that is starting. There are a lot of political imperatives that are being framed and developed by the center. So at this point, when we talk of implications about the rift between the NDPP and the BJP having an impact on Nagaland, I think it's quite clear this is a time that we cannot afford to lose the momentum of at least the developmental imperative that the government of India is starting to implement, especially in regard to the Act East policy. So it is going to have a very big impact on the people. And if there is going to be, let's say, a parting of ways between the BJP and the NDPP, it will mean that the burden will have to be carried by the local people, by the people of Nagaland. You are going to go for snap elections in the middle of the term, which means there will be more resources and time that will be spent on electioneering again, and we are going to lose at least 1 year of a developmental period where we lose at least 1 year. We're going to go for elections. There will be a lot of politicking between the parties, and obviously neither the NDPP or the BJP, they have clear single party majority. So which means you are going to go about politicking, electioneering again. You are going to go lobbying. You are going to start creating alliances with other smaller parties. There will be a lot of complexities and difficulties in this, which means we are going to be the one to lose. It's not the government. So the implication is huge, and I think I would rather the guys in the alliance just work things out together and just talk it over and just get this at the root of the problem and discuss it. And because snap elections, like I said, the burden will be on the people. If there is any fissures, if there is any break in the alliance right now, the implications will be huge.
Ali, you just mentioned about not losing the momentum. So keeping that in mind, what measures were taken to ensure that all coalition partners, including the BJP elected councillors, had equal opportunities to propose their candidatures for key positions in the Dimapur Municipal Council?
There's a difficult question. I've never been a minister or a politician in my life, but I think during the discussions that we had earlier, we had talked about how the senior party leaderships of both the BJP and the NDPP should just sit quietly together in the corner and just sort things out. And I think it is also imperative for both the party leaderships to rein and control all its members in the legislature and of course in the municipalities, because obviously it's not Chingwang Konyak or NDPP or Mr. Jacob Zimomi who are giving out these controversial statements, if I may put it that way. It's the foot soldiers and the lower ranked members of the parties who seem to be coming up with all these controversial statements. So I think the best way to keep the government intact, and I think that's a very important point to note here. Like I said, if we go for snap elections, I think we will be the ones that will have to go through all the trouble again. And it takes a lot of time and effort and resources, and which is not really good for the state. So I think the coalition partners can sit together with their members also, and especially people who are used to making a lot of controversial statements in this regard, and discipline them and tell them, hey, we're partners. I think we should work this out together, because if they don't, the implications will be very difficult and it will be borne only by the citizens.
Now, coming to the question which is like the talk of the town among the stakeholders right now, How does the straight contest between the BJP and NDPP in the recent ULB election reflect on the coalition dynamics within the PDA?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, they went in as allies in the municipal elections, and the BJP had always maintained that it was going to be a friendly contest. But I think we didn't see with our eyes, so we don't know. But definitely there was some kind of a mismatch in their goals here, and maybe some strategic planning that were not in alignment with the common partnership goals here. So as we have seen during the municipal elections, I think there were a lot of politicking that did not really organize itself within the within the goals of the spirit of the alliance here. So one party did something else, which one party had agreed to do together with the first party. So there was a mismatch in their actions. So definitely there were some underpinnings that also suggested that they agreed on certain statements which they could not work out together during the electioneering process. So the conflict that we are seeing right now, I think, points to one-upmanship here. They agreed together to go in for a friendly contest, but we have seen the results also. We have seen some of the controversial statements that were made, and most of the statements somehow seem to lean heavily towards the NDPP. So, like I said, we did not see what was going on under the table, or we did not see what was going on behind closed doors. But what we have seen is that the NDPP has been very, very assertive. Mrs. Hekani Jakalu, I think she had made some very strong statements, and then all these statements, they reflect a one-upmanship and a singular taking over of the space by the NDPP, which might have made the NDPP, the BJP feel a little less than a partner here. So the discontent that is arising, I think it has a natural root in that the NDPP decided to take everything upon itself and take the whole space. So we have seen the disparities. I'm not saying they were illegal. I'm not saying there was some kind of some negative action, but I'm just saying that if you look at the results, maybe if you are going in as partners, the results might not have that wide disparity as we saw, more than 170 for the NDPP, but for its partner only 25, which is, again, I don't think it worked within the agreements that they made in the spirit of an alliance. Definitely one party decided to do things on its own. So I would say there's a rift.
Ali, could you maybe shed some light on the process followed by the NDPP in selecting the chairperson and deputy chairperson of Dimapur Municipal Council, and were the BJP councillors adequately informed and involved in this process?
Right now, like I say, that we don't know what is going on behind closed doors, because these are organizational activities that are concerned only with the party's leadership. They are the ones to take actions in this regard. Who chooses the chairperson, who chooses the deputy chairpersons, and the allocations of their responsibilities within the municipalities. We don't know, we have not seen, so we can't say much. But what I can say is, if you're going in as partners in this, the BJP and the NDPP and the other allies, if you're going in together, that means that you're going to consult with your partners. You are going to talk to each other, have meetings and sit together and say, okay, let's do this, let's not do that. What do you think about this? This is our idea. What do you plan to do about this? There should be discussions and consultations. And like I said, we did not know what happened and what's been happening behind closed doors. But if the DMC members from the BJP would release a statement expressing their displeasure that they were not consulted, I think they were not consulted. I think there was some breach in the trust where they were expected to also contribute, but they were not given the opportunity to contribute to the whole discussion process. So if they're saying they were not consulted, I think they were not consulted. If they feel that they were sidelined, then I think they were not. They were sidelined, because the very fact that we have this issue in the media says a lot, that there is only one party that is trying to pull the reins, and that is why there is an expression of displeasure in this regard.
Ali, with all this information around us now, is it possible to explain the reasoning, or maybe an explanation and the reasoning behind not appointing a BJP member as a deputy chairperson despite requests from BJP legislators? How does this align with the spirit of coalition governance, and how bad is this for the PDA coalition?
It's very bad, like we talked about earlier. If there is a rift, and the BJP decide to sit in the opposition in the Nagaland government, and also in the municipal elections, municipal institutions, is going to be very bad, which means, like I said, we're going to go for a lot of electioneering again. We're going to go for snap elections. The developmental process will have to be stopped to get a new government in order. And of course, there will be a conflict even within the communities, because all the representatives come from the communities. So there are a complex network of issues here at play. So if they decide to sit, the BJP decide to sit in the opposition, definitely you are now setting up the foundation to play opposition and in fighting, even at the governmental, at the state level. I think that is very clear. So as we talked about earlier, there is only one party that seems to be trying to pull the reins in here, and I think it's the NDPP, because the ones complaining are primarily from the BJP. So I think if we refer to Mr. Limatoshi's long statement earlier about the NDPP not trusting the BJP, of course he did not say directly the BJP. If we consider his statements, and if we also consider the statement of advisor Jakalu in regard to the NDPP being the only party that will be able to lead the people, and the NDPP going in at 8 alone without even its ally, the BJP, I think it speaks much about one party trying to claim the space of its allies also. And so when you have that many members in the government at the state level, excuse me, and if you have that many members in the municipal institutions belonging to you, it is obvious that you're going to flex a lot of muscle, because you know there is no opposition who is going to resist you. So I think they're trying to claim the space of its ally and trying to marginalize the BJP. I feel that's what they're trying to do.
Well, Ali, we are almost coming to an end of the discussion, but before that, in light of the discrepancies reported by the BJP councillors, what efforts will be made to foster greater transparency and inclusivity within the PDA's internal decision-making mechanism?
I think they should just sit. Just sit together, talk things out, go back to the genesis of the problem, and that is just in the run-up to the Lok Sabha elections. Talk over it. Get in touch with the people who made those statements that escalated the situation. Talk together, the party leadership talk together and sort this thing out, because like I said, it's not good for, it might be good for the government, it might work for one party or the other, but it's not going to be good for the electorate, because we're going to go through the same trouble over and over again and halt all developmental processes in this regard.
Wrapping up my discussion with this one last question, how does the PDA plan to address the concerns raised by the BJP councillors to ensure continued cooperation and effective governance within the coalition framework?
The Chief Minister, Mr. Nephew, had already said that the PDA alliance is united. There's no rift, there's no break. And they even issued a statement, joint statement, saying everything is okay with the PDA. But what we're seeing at the ground level, especially among his foot soldiers, is that there's a lot of discontent. It says that not everything that the joint statement says and not everything that the Chief Minister has said is correct. So I think they should just sit together and sort this thing out.
Well, thank you, Al, for joining us today and discussing on this very important topic. That was on the BJP councillors alleging exclusion. We'll be giving you more updates on this topic as it progresses. Thank you for watching Hornbill TV.